Hello there, Fab folks, and welcome to the kickoff of the Commoner series here on Dice Commando. Now, a large part of the Commoner format is all about taking advantage of some of the lesser seen cards in traditional Constructed. So today I'm covering some cards that you just might be sleeping on in the Commoner format. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks, and welcome back to Go Again, a fabulous cast here on Dice Commando. Thanks so much for tuning in today for the kickoff of the Commoner series here on the channel. Now, I'm pretty excited about this little series, and I hope that you are too. Kicking it off, talking about some cards that might have slipped through the cracks when you were building your decks. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure we take the time to acknowledge that flesh and blood is just a part of our lives, and that real life sometimes takes precedent. You may notice the odd coloring in this video, and that's because the sky here is currently full of smoke from wildfires elsewhere in the state. So if you are affected by the wildfires, I want you to know that we wish you all the best, and if there's anything the community can do to help, to let us know. Please stay safe, folks. So today, as you can see already, we're doing this PTI style, kind of a crowd favorite. Now, I do want to point out that these aren't in a countdown order per se, because most of these have different uses and work in different decks. Furthermore, let me know what cards you like to use in Commoner that you think might not see much place elsewhere. Do you have anything spicy? Let me know in the comments below. All right, so heading on over to the first card. What's this one? Whisper of the Oracle. No, that's not this one, right? I'm actually using Whisper of the Oracle. We see a ton of this one even in Classic Constructed type decks. It was running around in Briar for a long time. Why is this card good? Because it's a blue that defends for 3. That's its main issue. Now, sure, in some Runeblades, you use it in a pinch as a non-attack. But for the most part, it was because this baby was blue and defends for 3. When I was looking through some of the other stuff, you know what actually popped up from the 2-player set was this guy, the Titanium Bauble. I know, it's not exactly a super hot take, it's not exactly a super amazing card, but look at what this baby does. It pitches for 3, it defends for 3. So if you're in a pinch, if you're running out of cards to find that you can't find what you want, you don't want to have a whole bunch of defend 2s, there you go. Now I do want to point out this has no cost, so be careful, you Kodachi players. That said, there's a lot of other decks that may want to take advantage of this one. All right, moving on is Lunging Press. Now, Lunging Press has been around for a long time. I don't believe it's a secret card to anyone. However, I do believe that this card is criminally underplayed, perhaps even in some of the normal Constructed formats. Now, there are a lot of classes that I believe want to use this card. Ninjas, perhaps, good one for them. They may have a lot of other options, but someone like Ninja, right? Ranger. Someone like Ranger would get a lot of mileage out of this card, potentially, instead of just relying only on necessarily Razor. Now, I do want to point out for the weapon-based decks that this does not work. This is attack action card only, and it's just the blue for 1. But again, this is a blue pitch that, if you have it in your hand and you need to hit, can come over the top and can sometimes surprise your opponent. These next two I want to do together. And the primary reason they are together is when I look at some of the Icelander decks, at least that I've run up against to date, I feel that a lot of players are almost a little too Uprising heavy with their Icelander decks. Now, for that statement to make sense, let's put in context really what Icelander's job is. What she wants to do is lob these big bombs, right? Your Aether Ice Veins, your Ice Bolts. She kind of wants to lob those two for the 5ers. She wants to lob the 5ers over on her turn, and then on your turn, meaning the person playing against her, she's going to try to disrupt you, right? Something from Arsenal, and then Waning Moon you, right? Now, Waning Moon on Icelander's turn obviously only hits for 2. That's why a lot of times it's not a priority. That said, that's why I think these cards actually do have a place. Again, I do find that obviously Icelander needs her blue cards, her blue ices, for her ability. That said, once it gets into the reds, she's not fusing all that often. There are a couple cards out there that want fused, but I do think some people have gone a little too heavy into the red ice package. So I look at cards like Scalding Rain and Voltic Bolt. Now, Voltic Bolt's a classic 2 for 5. It fits right along Ice Bolt, except it's obviously not ice. But you look at Scalding Rain, like, well, Andrew, why Scalding Rain? Because it's a 1 for 4, which means that you can 1 for 4 on, if you're the Icelander player, on your turn, and then you can Waning Moon. Now, granted, only for 2, but that's a single card. Well, it's a 2 card. The card is Scalding Rain, and then a blue pitch to fire off on your turn. Not too shabby in a pinch. Now, not to mention that they're playing Snapback, and you have all sorts of potential tricks. Usually you want to play Snapback on their turn, I grant you that. But gives you plenty of options being that 1 for 4. So maybe you don't like the 1 for 4, but I do think that, again, trying to lob those bombs and get over the top, these cards, I think, are maybe potentially being slept on by some of the Icelander players. Right, moving on, Blade Flash. So this is an interesting card out of the 2-player set because when we all saw it, it kind of just went in the nah bin, right? Because we looked at it and we're like, well, that's just a bad glint. It costs 1, it costs more, defends less, and you don't get as much out of it. However, we don't have glint, and Kassai does have Blade Runner, but Dorinthea doesn't, right? So if you're trying to Dorinthea deck, Blade Flash, I think, works perfectly well. You might also consider it if you are a Runeblade. I can come up with some weird scenarios in which a Runeblade might want it. Probably not the best, but again, it's a blue. So I do keep in mind that Blade Flash, just because it went in our, well, that's a bad card bin in our heads, it's a different format. Right, next, let's go back to the 2-player set, On Guard. So again, this was another one of those cards where like, well, it's, 1 for 3, defends 3. It's actually not too bad with goes. That said, it's one, you don't have access to a lot of things in that vein, right? So to that end, you might want to explore using this card as a warrior, right? So remember, you don't have Slice and Dice. You don't have Warrior's Valor. So to that end, that's why I'm saying, card like On Guard, which also defends for 3, which most warrior cards do, is kind of right on curve there. So just because it's not as good as something else, something to consider. All right, next, I also want to throw up Vigor Rush. So Vigor Rush is a card that I think potentially people are sleeping on in Runeblade decks. I can certainly see this being used in Chane, maybe not Viserai as much, but I think also Briar as well, because I think this card goes really well into the Rosetta package, absolutely into the Rosetta package. A Nimbleism into Vigor Rush into Rosetta Thorn, or Come to Fight into Vigor Rush into Rosetta Thorn. You guys get it, right? Some sort of pump into this, into Rosetta Thorn, or I don't know, whatever else you have at your disposal as Chane. Maybe you go that Vigor Rush into something else and Shackle into Rosetta Thorn, right? Whatever you want to do there. I think that Vigor Rush is something worth considering for some of the Runeblade decks. Right, next I do have Critical Strike. Now you look at this card and you're like, well, there's not really, like, it's just a 1 for 5, but a defense for 3. There is a blue version of this. I do like the red version more. You look at a card like Torrent of Tempo or something like that, and I realize it's a slightly different situation, and I don't think ninjas would play this because they have access to this. But this is a pretty good card overall, right? And if you get down to the point where you're like, I only have 36 cards or 38 cards in my deck, things aren't really where I want them to be, I think Critical Strike is a card worth looking at. I know that this was a card that I actually really enjoyed in Draft and Limited, or Draft and Sealed. In Uprising, I got a lot of use out of this card in general. So I think that applies here as well. Not for everyone, but if you're in a pinch. And then final one I have today, it is kind of a save the best for last in this scenario, which is Brothers in Arms. I think this card should be seeing a lot more play. I'm really surprised to not have seen it in Icelander decks to date, because it's kind of the same thing. Like, let's say you play one of your blue zeros from Arsenal, and then you do the Waning Moon. Well, you've got 1 floating, and now Brothers in Arms, you can actually pay that and defend for 4, right? Because when you defend, you can pay 1 and it gets +2. Someone else who gets a lot of mileage out of this, and I haven't seen it in the decks, is Dromai. I have not seen it in many Dromai Commoner decks. To be fair, I've only run up against 2, but I have not seen it in those decks. And I think this one's pretty good for Dromai because it also lets her make the Ash that she wants to make. if she needs to, and I think generally she does. So I think this card is pretty good for a lot of, maybe not like a Bravo or something like that, because it has its own issues, or it doesn't quite fit in that, not its own issues, doesn't quite fit in that. But I think Brothers in Arms for a lot of heroes who don't necessarily want to run D-Reacts and stuff like that, I think it serves a purpose. And hey baby, it's blue. All right, so that'll do it for today. So what do you think about the list? What cards do you have that didn't make the list? Let me know in the comments. Any cheeky stuff, any surprising stuff out there? Let's get the conversation started. So thanks much for joining for the kickoff. We'll be back hopefully every week with commoner stuff. If nothing else, folks, go Commando.